Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. We have Gabi Snyder with us tonight. Gabi is a picture book author, and she had a brand new book just come out today. So we're very excited about that. So pretty. Every time I look at it, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so gorgeous. All of Gabi's books are really pretty, but I don't know, this one might be the prettiest one yet. They just keep getting prettier and prettier and prettier. So we're going to talk about Look, which she just showed on the screen. The other one we're going to talk about probably fairly extensively is Today, because that one also came out in the last few months. Yay. And yeah, we'll just talk about her books that just came out. We're going to talk a little bit about picture books in general, just kind of hang out for a little while. We also have very cute background entertainment over there.
Meal.
So,
Oh,
Gaby, can you just start out by talking about both Look and Today, which came out, like we said, today and then just a few weeks ago, and kind of how those books came to be, anything interesting about their origin stories and all of that good, and maybe just a little bit about each book too.
oh, good questions. Yeah, I think, well, so both Look and Today are from the same publisher as my earlier book, Listen.
Yeah. Yes.
And both Listen and Today have the same illustrator, Stephanie Gregan. You could definitely see
Yes.
the similarity. And they're both Simon and Schuster, Paula Wiseman books, as is Look, although Look clearly has a different illustrator, Samantha Cotterill. And I think that after Listen, there was sort of a sense that a book that has some elements of mindfulness was needed and was actually fairly popular. And so I think both Look and Today stemmed somewhat from that and also from my own personal experiences. I'll start with Today. Today is kind of about our perception of time, and especially when you're a kid, how sometimes when you're waiting for something like a holiday or vacation, it can feel like time is just taking forever. It's dragging. And then you get into this wonderful moment and you kind of lose track of time and it can seem to just stretch almost endlessly. And I feel like I was a kid who often was waiting for time to pass. And then sometimes you would get to those really special moments that you wanted to freeze forever. In this book, one of she's, or he, I think, is waiting for a family vacation. And they get there, and the moment I think that they're waiting for the most is probably these.
Ah,
It's like the fireworks pop, boom, burst, and the today you've been waiting for is here, and now, and now, and now in a flash, it's gone. And I think we do experience some of those really magical moments that way. They sort of stretch and then they're
yeah.
gone.
Yeah.
And this book is also about how sometimes a favorite today can turn into a memory that you can revisit time and time again. So, and I think that's a really lovely message for kids that
Yeah.
even though time is fleeting and some of the really magical moments with our families and others do pass, we can hold on to them in the form of memories, even when someone is gone. Uh, um, and then Look is partly inspired by my love of patterns. I've always been a pattern lover, and I like just seeing them when I'm out on a walk, both in nature and just in human-made things. I think even as a kid, I really just took a lot of solace, I guess, in finding patterns, mathematical
Yeah.
patterns, just in different look. But like the others, it also has the mindfulness element, I think, which is coming from like when the world feels a little bit overwhelming, can you look or can you kind of take a pause, look around you and find patterns, and from those patterns find some calm and kind of help make sense and order of your world, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you
Um,
want to show us a couple favorite pages from that one?
yeah. Oh, and the illustrations are just so beautiful.
Yes, I'm going to ask a little bit more about that in a few minutes
Yeah,
because I want to really get
colors
into
are
it. But
amazing.
yeah, they are really pretty.
It's hard to choose a favorite. I'll just read the first spread and then
Okay, that would
let
be
it
lovely.
set the stage. We are in this vast world, and the world is all around, filled with colors and shapes and sizes. It can be a lot to take in. Maybe I'll read the first few spreads. But what if you stop, look around, and get a closer view? Take a look at stripes. Light, dark, light, dark. Look. You see that okay?
Yeah.
So just even the way Samantha does the lighting of these, it's just beautiful for
Yeah.
Rama 3D style. And then maybe I'll show you one towards the end that shows another kind of lighting at dusk.
Mm.
Gotta go back a page. The things we build, can you find patterns on the sidewalks, streets, and buildings? Look. On the way home, can you find patterns? The lighting in the dusk. Whew, kind of
Mm.
a
The colors are just so rich.
yeah, she really does such vivid colors.
I was trying to think of so you have look and you have listen and you have today, and then we have the Earth one, which I'm blanking on the name, but
That's okay.
yes,
It's, count on us, climate activists from 1 to 1 billion,
which
which
also has some patterning to it in the form of numbers, which I think
it
is really
does. Yeah,
yeah.
the
But most of your work is has this really interesting combination of nature and mindfulness. And I'm wondering how you have kind of what that means to you in your own life, because I'm guessing there is some personal stuff to that, given that it shows up so often for you.
definitely, I think both in my childhood and currently, I've taken a lot of, I guess I'd say the word solace from being out in nature. And sometimes I do get, and as a child, even more so, a little bit overwhelmed by just the sheer volume and noise of the world. And so I would like to kind of retreat into, and I think a place in nature is really, can really help ground you.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
think also combining that with tuning into your senses and what you're seeing and hearing and feeling on your body, it just can be really, I don't know, just meditative and also tuning
Yeah.
into your breath, I think. So, yeah, I think I have found as an adult as well that nature walks are especially good for me and taking
What do
deep
you
breaths.
think about when you think taking those concepts, which on some level are so intuitive, but are also fairly sophisticated? It's like they're super simple, but also not super simple at the same time. And what do you think about when you think about like conveying that to kids?
Mhm.
What's in your mind as a writer when you're thinking about conveying, like maybe like in today, like you're thinking about conveying the sense of time and the passage of time, which for little kids is actually a fairly difficult concept until, they get into like second or third grade. It's a little tricky.
It is tricky. I think part of it is modeling it for them. But like in today, I think it's also finding a relatable situation. Like I think most kids will recognize that feeling of like you want to go someplace and you're having to wait and wait and wait to get there. Like I especially like the today takes forever when your parents yak 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 with the neighbors. Like I feel like
And what kid hasn't had to deal with that?
I remember I used to pick my son up after school in like first, second grade, and I would be talking to other parents, and he would just be so ready to go, and he would sometimes start just like headbutting me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm ready. I don't have the words to tell you, but I'm just really
Yeah.
ready to go.
My
So I
kids used to have it a term, the mom trap, because we'd all go pick them up at school and we'd all stand around in the hallway and be talking, and the kids would be out doing something and come in and it was like, oh, you got stuck in the mom trap.
think, yeah. Sometimes like if they had a friend they were playing with, they wouldn't mind, but other times they just ready
Yeah,
to come home
yeah.
and have a snack or whatever. Yeah. So yeah,
When
I don't know.
I think we talked about this a little bit before, so hopefully someone's not watched the immediate, hopefully we aren't repeating the exact same thing, but I think I won't, because I have a little bit different questions. But the concept of being a writer writing a picture book when you're not also the illustrator, and now that you've worked with, I think it's three different illustrators, and I'm
Four
very
actually,
curious.
four
And I
actually, because there's also two
Oh,
dogs.
that's right. I forgot about two dogs.
Yeah.
Yay. Oh, I'm
Yeah.
glad you had that one because I had forgotten about that one. Um, and I think we've touched on this before when we've done these interviews. So people who've watched more than one will remember that there are author illustrators in picture books, but a lot of times, even if you are an illustrator, the publisher will pair you up with a different illustrator. So y- I'm always curious to hear, as a writer, like your experience of what you think about when you're creating it. How do you leave space for the illustrator? As someone who's been in the kidlit world, of course, I've heard like, so, like workshop topics and stuff on this, but people who are coming at it from just a reader's point of view won't necessarily have heard all the all the
True.
shop talk that we've heard. And so I'm curious if you could just talk about that a little bit, about the experience of being a writer who's writing a picture book, but you're leaving space for the illustrator. How do you think about that? Do you write more to begin with and then back it off? Or how does that work for you, of course, because also every writer is different in how they're going
Right.
to approach it.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a tricky thing, especially since as a writer, you get so much varying advice about like you can never have an illustration note in a manuscript.
Yes.
You must strip them all out before you send them to an editor or agent. Which I think, anytime there's like a really extreme advice like that, there's going to be some exceptions.
Yes. Yeah.
But I do think it's interesting because, in part, because picture books used to be longer. And so I think there
Yeah.
used to be more of that description. There used to be longer, I think they were called, what were they? They weren't just called picture books. They're like there's a,
Storybooks, or yeah, illustrated storybooks or something along.
yeah. And so
Yeah.
they were kind of like picture books, but they were a little more story, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah.
So now most picture book texts are going to, unless they're nonfiction, are going to be 500 words or less. So I guess maybe I've written enough of them that I don't feel like I'm writing a lot more than it's going to need in the end, maybe a bit more. But yeah, anything that could be shown in the illustration, unless it's really important to the lyricism or to the story that I'm trying to tell, I would probably leave to the illustrator.
Right.
But yeah, it's like, obviously probably wouldn't describe the color of sweater that someone's wearing in a picture
Yeah.
book, for instance. But yeah, in terms of leaving room for the illustrator. Sometimes I do have something that I want to show visually in the book that I don't state in the text. And then I do put in an illustration note. And of course, an editor might decide, well, I'm going to take that out and see what the illustrator does. And it might
Yeah. Yeah.
end up adding something that I never would have imagined that'll be way better. But I will say that like for Two Dogs on a Trike, that's a very sparse text, and there isn't really anything until the very end that tells you that there's a cat following them. So without the
Ah,
illustration note that I had in the manuscript, I don't think this book would have sold because it wouldn't have been it wouldn't have seemed
yeah.
like a
Yeah.
super interesting read without the cat following, that adds a lot to the story. And so I think it was good that I had an illustration
Yeah.
note
Yeah.
there, but I also did leave room for the illustrator in that, um, of course, I'm not describing what these dogs look like. There's a ton of room for her to do all the character design. And
Yeah.
in the middle of this book, 10 dogs, wait, this is the one spread where I don't say where they are. And she put them on a spaceship. So I think, they're like on all these different modes of transportation where I say, 7 dogs on a ferry, 8 dogs on a plane, 9 daring dogs on a hot air balloon, 10 dogs wait. So Robin Rosenthal, the illustrator,
Yeah.
added the spaceship. So
That's
fun
adorable.
surprise for me when I
Yeah. Yeah.
saw the book. Like,
I
I think
think it's interesting to look back at older picture books that were A, longer, and B, often less interaction between the illustrations and the words. Not always. Like I think of like Harry the Dirty Dog was very interactive with the dog running around and had getting himself into all the trouble, and there's still lots of interaction between the words and the pictures. But there were a lot of cases where there really wasn't. It was more like a words and then an illustration of whatever. It was almost like a repetition, and I've seen that growth from into the point of the author writes words for the story, and then the illustrator is also telling the story like the spaceship,
mm-hmm.
that it's that the author didn't necessarily decide that that was a spaceship, like there's such a collaboration, and without one or the other it doesn't tell the same story, which I think is one of the really magical things about what comes at the end of that collaboration. Is it's a wholly unique thing that couldn't have happened without both parties being involved. And so
Exactly. And that's one of my favorite things about picture books as well. When there's a separate author and illustrator, they really do add. And so it's like the two parts, the whole is greater than the two parts for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Um,
Can you talk a little bit about look? Because I noticed that you had posted some stuff on social media about the particular illustrations in that book and how they were created. Can you talk about that a little bit?
yes. Yeah. I wish the illustrator Samantha
Yeah, that
Cox
would be
was
fun.
here.
I should have thought of
Um,
that.
but yeah, she basically creates 3D dioramas out of paper and other materials and builds basically these sets, and then puts the characters into the sets, takes photographs that she's lit to be the right time of day and everything. So it's very, I think, painstaking work, but I think she also loves it. But I mean, I can't even imagine how long it takes for the level of detail.
Yes.
She built,
Does
she
she then put the,
she built this house. I've seen the pictures of this
that's
set.
amazing.
Um, Let me see if I can find one where it's really obvious all the little
The
things.
cover is definitely like super obvious that you're looking into a scene, which I love.
This farmer's market.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. I guess the lighting here in my house, we're also seeing some light dark shadows,
Yeah.
but um, let's see, can you see how there's like individual vegetables there?
Yeah, yeah. And
She,
it's not super clear, but the other thing I could think you can really see is you get depth in a way that you don't necessarily get um
uh,
even a really good like perspective drawing. This looks different, I think. And um
thought I was closing some blinds, but I guess I still have some open.
no, but but there's a little bit less light. So yeah, no, I it looks like yeah, like you're looking into one of those shadow play theater things almost. That's
Yeah,
Do you
it's
know, did she take it into the computer then at that point and then work on it? Or is it
that's
just
a good
photographs?
question. I don't know if she did
Yeah.
any editing, like when she took the photos, if she edited them, edited, I cannot speak, but yeah, I think she did most of the work, with the actual 3D models. Here's the
Yeah.
boats.
That's amazing.
She built these little boats. Yeah, it's yeah, it's a lot. I don't know how long it took her to do all of it, but
Yeah. No, and I knew that, there was paper craft involved just from looking at the pictures. They remind me very much of, I was trying to think of other paper craft artists like Steve Jenkins and stuff. But Um, I didn't realize that she'd actually built the little diorama scene until you said that. So that's very neat.
yeah, she's done that for a few others too. Most recently, I think Grateful. I think the author is Elaine Vickers. Um, that one came out maybe a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, it also has that style. It's really beautiful.
When you're working with illustrators, now that you've done a few, has it been a little bit different process with each one or with different publishers, or has it been pretty similar across the board?
It's actually been fairly similar across the board. I mean, so far, publishers have kept the illustrator and author separate
Yeah.
during
I
the
think that's
process.
most
So,
typical, but
yeah,
yeah.
I think so. I mean, in terms of like selecting the illustrator, there has been some variety. Like in a few cases, they've said, "This is who we have in mind. What do you think?" And I said, "That would, she looks amazing.
Yeah.
Yes."
Yeah.
And other times, it's been, "Here's your illustrator," and I say, "Great." So,
Yeah, yeah,
sometimes there's a little bit of weigh in that the author has, and other times, no, you don't
yeah.
really.
That seems to very much depend on, for sure, the publisher and then sometimes the individual project too.
I think
So,
that's right.
yeah,
Yeah. But then, I work with the editor to get my manuscript into um, the best shape possible, although there will occasionally be a few edits once the illustrator starts working, I think. And that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I
yeah,
think
yeah,
as someone starts working on the illustrations, it could be that they'll realize, maybe depending on the page turns, that there's a word or two that isn't needed, or a little something else to set something up,
yeah,
or
yeah,
another idea they had that's similar, but just requires some wording changes. And that, I think that did actually happen. I can't remember exactly what the specifics were, but I do think Samantha had a few suggestions for look that probably improved it, but I don't remember exactly
yeah,
what
yeah.
they were. But that all came through the editor. It wasn't like I
Yes,
did
yeah.
exactly
No,
what.
it's interesting to me how I think it is such a fascinating process, and it's not one that most people get like the window to, which is why I always try to ask these kinds of questions, is it's very interesting to think about. You're not talking directly to each other, like you're going through the editor. And so then the editor becomes this pivotal person too, because they're the ones pulling the words together and the images together and all of the making sure that they all like work together. And then you have book designers and cover designers and all kinds of, obviously copy editors and everything else. But I think that you often lose how many people it takes to really make something that amazing. So,
That's really true. There are a lot of people working on it. And we'll give a shout out, like for Listen, my editor was Sylvie Frank, who's now at Disney Hyperion. And then she actually is the one who acquired Look. But then I think she moved kind of right as I was starting the editing process. So I mostly worked with Paula Wiseman at of Paula Wiseman Books for both Look and Today. Yeah.
that's neat. Yeah. It's fun that you got to have repeat because I think sometimes that's fun too to have a person that you know, that you trust, that you get to work with again. That's
Yeah,
really,
really, really lucky.
yeah. So, what's next? Are you working on anything else?
Well, so I haven't actually, in the past, I've always had something else in the pipeline. I haven't actually sold any other picture books. There are a couple things that are out on submission. There's one that's a maybe, so I can't really
Yeah.
talk about
Yeah.
that. It's basically a revise and resubmit. So I'd love to tell you about it, but until I know it's really going to be,
Fingers crossed. Yeah,
well,
no, I know you can't talk about them yet.
but in terms of things that I'm working on that haven't gone out on submission yet, I'm working on a book that I hope someday will be ready to go out on submission that's about basically starlight and about it was inspired in part by all the images coming back from the Webb telescope
Oh,
and
very
how,
cool.
we're seeing across space and time. And so it has some concepts that I think a lot of people, myself included, do have a hard time conceptualizing.
Yeah.
So the struggle has really been to put it into terms that a kid is going to understand. So using a lot of analogies. So I'm still working on that, but I hope someday it'll be
Oh,
ready to.
I hope so. I can imagine the illustrations for that one. That could be amazing.
I think so. Yeah. So fingers crossed. I'm also working on a manuscript about the science of dreams that's fiction, but has some nonfiction woven into it.
Yeah.
Not sure if that'll just be sidebar text or more back matter.
How do you, when you're working early on with concepts, we when we talk to novelists, we talk about plotting and pantsing.
Mhm.
And I think with picture books, sometimes it's not so much plotting and pantsing as it is like what order the research comes in. So
Mhm.
for you, how does that work? Do you like deep dive into research before you start writing, or do you kind of write and research as you're going along?
Usually there's an idea that I'm excited about, so I write as much as I can about what, yeah, I do tend to draft something that I can then work on, and then I see, well, I really need to research this. And sometimes the thing that I wrote initially doesn't end up being the most interesting thing to pursue.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's like there's that initial nugget or that initial inspiration, and you want to capture as much of that as possible, even if it turns out in your research that that's inaccurate or whatever.
Yes. Yes. I've had that happen before. It's like, dang, I can't put that in. But it gets you where you needed to be, so it's okay.
I think so too. Yeah, and it's just easier once you have a draft, to
Yeah. Yeah.
something to revise. It's just easier for sure.
Well, I'm crossing my fingers particularly for the Starlight one because I think that it's one of those really interesting concepts that I think you could do. It's like Jason Chin's now I'm going to send everybody to look up a book, but Jason Chin has a book called Gravity, and it's actually a
Oh,
wordless book.
I thought you were
But
going to say
he
your place in the universe because that's also really amazing.
Oh, I have to go look. I'm not sure I've seen that one, but the Gravity book is like, here's this very complicated concept, and he just, without any words in the book. Actually, or there might be a few. If there's words at all, there's like 5 or 10. Like it's really sparsely worded. And I think that that is so magical when you can figure out how to explain this super complicated concept in such a simple way. And I can only imagine the like thought process that goes into figuring that out to begin with. And I
Yeah,
think the Starlight is a similar what thing is that it's this super simple concept on one hand and this massively complicated, incomprehensible thing on the other hand.
right.
So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, it really is. What about you? I know you write
I'm
non.
mostly working on bookstore stuff, but I do have some grants that I'm working on some books for. So, but they are, yeah, they're mostly related to ocean research.
Oh,
So,
cool. Mm.
different scientists doing research, and then we come along and basically turn that research into picture books for kids so that they
Oh,
can share their research. And it kind
cool.
of it fulfills the education portion of a grant, where they're required to share out whatever they learned if they're getting grant funding. So
Oh, cool.
yeah, it's fun. But yeah, I mean that definitely is the part that I love is to take this very squirrely hard concept and try to figure out how to like get it to be a kid's book. And sometimes it works and sometimes it just doesn't work very well.
Sometimes
Or you can't think of it and somebody else will come up with it and you're like, oh, that's a good idea.
it's true. Sometimes it's just like you're trying to, yeah, I feel like sometimes I'm trying to tell too huge of a story and it really has
Yeah,
to be like
yeah,
just tiny piece of the story that
yeah,
you sort of blow
yeah.
up and make comprehensible. But
Yeah, no, and I think it comes back to something like you did with today of like bringing it to such a specific, um, relatable experience of waiting for something. And then you have this that it is a kind of a difficult concept, especially for little kids, but you've taken something from their world and figured out how to relate the two and then it works. And then
right.
it's magical because it works. But
Yay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, are there things that you like have in your back of your head that you want to write about? I guess that maybe morphs into a larger question of I mean the sort of the blunt way to put it, and I'm sure you get this, and I'm sure everybody who writes has gotten the, where do you get your ideas? But are there like areas that you're like, oh, I want to do this and I want to do this and
Well, I mean, I think as a kid, some of my, no, I love picture books, but I don't really remember them that well. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
books that I remember are more in the middle grade,
yeah, yeah,
grade level. Like I just remember being super moved by certain books, middle grade books, and then also certain books that I read with my kids when they were, when we would still sit on the couch and read together. I'm gonna pull one out. This book. This
oh
I,
yay,
I
yeah,
like if I could write The Girl Who Drank the Moon or something, something along those lines. This is Kelly Barnhill. I
yeah,
don't know. This book blew me away. So I do have a middle grade manuscript I'm working on that's has some magical elements, not as magical as this. So and I would love to get that in working order, but it's been
yeah,
at it off and on for 7 years or something like that. So it's I put it away for months at a
yeah,
time and
yeah,
then pick it up again. And it might be one of those things where your first novel is really practice, but I also don't quite want to give up on it and start a brand new one. So
yeah. No, I think that it's good to have the stuff that you're working on in the foreground, like, okay, this is going out on submission or this is sold and now I have to edit or whatever. And then to kind of have background projects that you get to, because I think there's a certain amount of like creative stimulation from having the ideas that you can let your brain go think about when you're tired of whatever you're working on and you need a break or whatever. So
Yeah, and it's kind of just simmering in the background, and then
yeah,
hopefully,
yeah,
there's been some time that's elapsed, and you go back to it, and you're like, oh, I actually have some new ideas for
yeah,
this
yeah.
now. You can
And I
approach it.
think it's easy in our sort of production oriented culture to forget that simmering is really part of the work.
Mhm.
And um,
That's true.
I think that's one of the hardest things for me anyway, of to give credit and credence to the fact that a lot of writing is not sitting and writing, it's thinking about it in the background or whatever. And
That's
so
true. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like some of my best ideas have been, when I'm out on a walk or doing dishes or
yeah,
taking a shower or whatever. So, yeah.
yeah. Do you have any favorite books by other authors that you've read recently that I could throw out there as recommendations for people?
I did grab a couple. This one is called Maybe a Whale. It's written
Mm.
by Kirsten Pendreigh. I'm not sure how you Pendreigh, I think it's how she says her last name, and illustrated by Crystal Smith.
That
And
is beautiful.
it's gorgeously illustrated. It's a very beautiful story. Um, a mother and daughter go out kayaking looking for whales, in part because they were going to go looking for whales with the grandfather who's passed away. And so it's sort of this
Wow, that's
whales
pretty.
and will they find the whales? It's yeah, I don't want to give anything away, but
Yeah,
how beautifully
that's really, really neat.
created it is.
Oh,
It's
I
set,
love how she did the spray, the illustration of the spray. It's really cool.
um, it's set in the Pacific Northwest. I think maybe both the author and illustrator are in British Columbia.
Ah,
It
yeah,
definitely feels familiar, it's got that.
that's neat.
And then the other one, this one's from a few years ago, but it's just really funny. Like I thought it'd be Abi Cushman. This is called Soaked. I don't know if you've seen this one.
I have not, but I'm gonna have to go look for it. That's really
Just
hilarious.
the facial expressions and all are just so funny. Um, let's see, show you. It's basically, oh, this bear. I don't know. It's mostly the bear's book, but it's beautiful.
Oh my goodness. The illustration captures that feeling of being so wet just really
It's
well.
like miserable. Yeah. Um, yeah, I don't know. Let's see, what else have I got? Mm, Should have grabbed some others. Oh, here we go. Actually, I'm not finding some of the ones I want, but I
That's
will.
okay. The three is perfect. Oh, yay. That's pretty.
Have you read this one?
I haven't, but I've seen it when I was looking for books to put out for Arab American Heritage Month, and this one came up on several lists. So,
Yes. Yeah, it's really lovely. It's basically about a girl, Kanzi, who's is moved from Egypt to America, and she really wants to fit in. And I think, trying to remember exactly, it's been a little while since I read it, but basically her classroom ends up making this quilt that includes everyone's name written in Arabic. And it ends up being a really lovely experience for her and for her classmates.
Oh, that's really neat. Very pretty. So I will put those in the recommend, like in the description so that everybody can
Oh,
see
good.
those. Thank you so much for being here tonight, and congratulations on the book coming out today. It's fun. It's always fun to talk on the actual day and
Yeah, for sure. It's good to do
for
something.
book birthday celebrations. So I really appreciate you being here. As a reminder, to everybody, Look and Today will be available in the store. And we could always order Listen, and the Count on Us and the Two Dogs on the Trike, I think, are still available through our distributors too. So if any of those looked fun, we either will have them or can get them fairly quickly. And yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. We've got Vintage Books Live coming in next week, and I'm totally blank. I'm pretty sure it's Jen Comfort that we're talking to next week. She's got a new rom-com out that came out the 1st of April. I will admit I could be completely wrong because I did not look at the schedule before I turned the turned the cameras on tonight, but I'm pretty sure that's who we're talking to next. So I hope you can join us for that. In the meantime, read lots of good books and have a good week. And thank you again, Gaby, for joining us, and have a good night.
Bye.